Hey, social justice scholars. Welcome to the Prejudice and Discrimination PowerPoint explanation. I am excited to talk to you all about these topics because it's super relevant to everything that we are going through currently in our society. And also, it's just been a large part of our history that it's good to understand these terms as a foundation, and we are able to understand different scenarios, different situations, if we first understand the difference between prejudice and discrimination. These terms have been used a lot interchangeably when it's quite different. So let's get started. And as we go through this topic, I want you to think about ways that prejudice and discrimination have played out in your life or in society in general, and how these terms can cause harm in real life. Because these terms in theory mean something, but how do these terms play out in real life, and how can they be harmful to society? Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. So what is prejudice? The book says that prejudice is or are preconceived notions about other people based on their social group. So, what does that mean? Preconceived notions. So, those are ideas that we have about other people simply based on whatever group that they are associated with, right? For example, you have a preconceived notion about me because I'm a professor, right? So, you think automatically some type of way about me. And you can apply that to any group, right? So, let's say, for example, in the media right now, a group of people that is highly talked about are immigrants that come to the border. And at today, at this point, it's largely talked about unaccompanied minors, right? So youth that are coming. So even though you don't know their situation, we might have preconceived notions about who they are, what they bring to the country, right? So then you go further, and it says that the prejudice are learned prejudgments about members of social groups to which we don't belong. Prejudice is based on limited knowledge or experience with the group. Simplistic judgments and assumptions are made and projected onto everyone from that group. So let's go with the example that I just gave on immigrants at the border, right? So even let's focus on the youth. So we learned something about this group, right? Because of our prejudgment, we learned it from somewhere. Where did we learn it from? We might have learned it from the media. We might have saw a news broadcast about it. We might have read in a newspaper or a social media post, or learning from our parents, or we've heard conversations about this topic. And that's where we get our information from. But we don't really necessarily have a lot of knowledge on the group, because if we did, we might, know a little bit more. We might not have the same prejudice about that group. And again, you can use it for any social group, whether it's people with disabilities, a certain racial group, a gender, any social group that people identify, you can have prejudice about, and you learn it from somewhere. And that's the key here, is that we need to understand where we learn these from so that we can be aware and conscious of this, so we don't continue these prejudices. Okay, so again, these prejudices begin with stereotypes. And where do we get those stereotypes from? Where do they originate? So stereotypes are simplistic sets of characteristics that are attributed to a whole group of people. For example, there's a lot of negative stereotypes about Black and brown men that are dangerous. Asians are smart, blondes are dumb, women are weak, etc. And so stereotypes don't necessarily have to be negative assumptions or simplistic sets of characteristics, but they are just applied generally, right? So they say all fill in the blank are X, Y, or Z, which is not always true. So I'm using here the picture of Trayvon Martin, who was murdered um, by a neighborhood watch captain or self-assigned captain as he walked home from the liquor store. So I'm purposely using this picture of Trayvon because it was widely shown as as part of the trial and explanation of the situation. And one thing that stands out is the hoodie. The hoodie became an icon, right? And for um, social justice groups and to show that just because he's wearing a hoodie doesn't mean he's dangerous. So if we're looking at this hoodie and we're looking at a young Black man or kid, right? He was tall, so that adds another stereotype. So a tall Black man wearing a hoodie, given prejudice that we have on certain groups throughout time, have created this image of being dangerous. Okay. So he was literally just walking home from the liquor store, minding his own business, and was murdered. So I want you to focus on these stereotypes and how the stereotypes eventually led to this murder of a young man who was minding his own business. So as we go through the video, some of you might know already the Trayvon Martin story, but for those of you that don't know, I will provide you some links to get some background information about this situation. And we're going to talk a little bit more later on at the end of this presentation about how stereotypes influenced the actions that occurred during this situation. So I posted, and on your module, I posted this PowerPoint, and it has a link to this YouTube video that provides you a history of how media has represented African Americans in the United States. So you can see that over time where these negative stereotypes come from. And on your own, I'm not going to show it to you now, but on your own, you're going to watch this YouTube video. And as you're watching, I want you to think, how do these stereotypes affect or influence prejudice? Okay, how do we, if we have limited knowledge about a group of people, and all we know about this group of people is what we're seeing on the TV or we're seeing in media, how can these negative stereotypes influence how we see this group of people? Okay, so again, you're going to go ahead and watch this on your own. So now let's look at discrimination. Discrimination, according to the book, is action based on prejudice towards social others. So if we know that prejudice are these preconceived notions of people, of a social groups, then discrimination is the action. So again, it's the action. Let's focus on that word. Discrimination occurs when we act on our prejudices. So we have this preconceived notion, which is a prejudice, but then when we take action, we do something about it, it becomes part of life, not just a thought. That's discrimination. So some examples would be ignoring people, avoiding them, excluding, ridicule, making jokes, slander, threats, and the worst is violence. So when we look at the Trayvon Martin situation, the murder of the young man, you can see that prejudice led to this discrimination because this man had a preconceived notion of what African American young men in hoodies represent, and ultimately ended in discrimination because it ended in violence and ultimately his death. So furthermore, let's look at how media impacts, again, these stereotypes and perpetuates either negative stereotypes or positive stereotypes, depending on which group we're referring to. So in the media during the trial, the pictures that were posted of Trayvon were the ones on the left, like, for example, the one on the left where he is showing off his teeth, his gold teeth. They show the hoodie. They brought up a lot of negative information about him, and it was not given in context. For example, he had a suspension for having, I believe it was marijuana residue, something to that effect, at school. And instead of talking about all of the good things or showing the the picture on the right where he is a normal or a typical young man, and the picture on the right, he's smiling and happy, they continuously chose to focus on the negative. And I want you to think about what that does to people's perception of him and of other folks in his social group that look like him, that may identify with his race, his gender, whatever it may be. How do these portrayals affect our prejudice and ultimately discrimination? So again, Trayvon Martin was a young man walking home from the liquor store, was confronted and followed by a older gentleman, not gentleman, an older man, and confronted. Not a lot of, there was no video, there was only witness testimony to to figure out what happened. And ultimately, the person that killed him, George Zimmerman, claimed that he was defending himself, and so he had to shoot him. And because there was no video or anything like that, and given the rules or the laws in Florida where this took place, he was found not guilty. Okay. And there's a video on here as well that I can post that goes into more depth about the story and the background of the laws. But he was ultimately murdered, and the murderer got away with it because he was able to say he was in fear of his life, even though the murderer called 911, and he was told not to follow Trayvon. He still did. He pursued him. He invoked all of this stuff, but because of laws that have been criticized before and are continuing to be criticized, he was able to get away with it. So that's another topic that we will revisit later on. But think about that. What did it mean to see a young Black teenager wearing a hoodie in a gated community? And we'll talk about this even further in a couple of weeks, but think about that. What did it mean, and why did that alone? Because literally that alone represented something that triggered fear in this adult man, George Zimmerman, enough fear to call the police and say that this young man wasn't, that he was he was a threat, and that he wasn't supposed to be there. So I want you to think deeply about that. What was it that represented fear, and why, given what we talked about prejudice and stereotypes and discrimination? So to end, I want you to think about this, and I want you to do a quick write. For extra credit, you can upload, and I'll post a assignment where you can upload a quick write to these questions. So what are the connections between prejudice and discrimination in the Trayvon Martin case? How has the historical representation of Black men in the US and abroad influenced the stereotypes of them today? How did these stereotypes ultimately play a role in the death of Trayvon Martin? And what can be done to make a change? So again, we talk about in this course in social justice, not only what's happening, not only where did it come from, what are the foundations, but what can we do moving forward? How can we make a change? Social justice scholars are all about dismantling oppressive systems and making active change. So what can we do? What can you and I do to start making a change? Okay, and if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message on Canvas inbox and we can go from there.